Recording. All right, here we go. Anyhow, shalom aleichem, and I want to welcome everybody to lesson number 3. And the title of the lesson is called Pregnancy Questions. All right, so before we get started, I always like to share something light and a joke or something. So this is a famous joke you probably know, but it relates to what we're talking about because the title is Pregnancy Questions. Basically, we're going to speak about abortion today, all right? Let's not kid ourselves. We're going to use the word. There were a few Jewish women at Starbucks, and they were discussing, when does life begin? When does it all start? So this one said, I don't know, the first trimester, second trimester, when you're born. Everybody had another idea. One woman says, when the kids graduate from medical school. That's when life begins. All right. Anyhow. It didn't go over that well. But anyhow.
Now that I'm retired, you say, no, it begins when you retire.
It's when you retire. That's when life begins. Well, it depends. It depends how you make retirement. Yes. That's really true. All right. Anyhow, that's the joke. We'll get that out of the way. And we have a wonderful lesson. I just want to say that I say this many times, that I'm a student of this as much as everybody else. And again, I probably am the biggest beneficiary of these classes because it really gives me an insight because of the amount of time that I have to prepare for each one of these lessons. I get to see it more in depth. And being that I'm the leader of the class, what am I called? The instructor. I'm bound by an hour and a half, and I really don't like to go past the 9 o'clock mark. So we're going to try to make this class as so sometimes I have to choose to skip a certain part or not emphasize a certain part because of the time constraints. Okay, we're going to get started here. So this is lesson number 3, and today we are going to be addressing a very important and highly sensitive topic. As I mentioned earlier, it's about abortion. But before we begin the lesson, I want to make it very, very clear that what we will not be discussing tonight is the public policy regarding abortion. All right, so we're not going to get into the whole debate with Supreme Courts and politics. Our lesson literally has, well, I shouldn't say it has nothing to do with it. You could actually maybe have a new perspective, a refreshing perspective of what Yiddishkeit, Judaism, halacha, Jewish law has to say about ending the life of a fetus. So we're going to spend our time learning and discussing Jewish texts. That's pretty much what we do all the time, about when abortion is permitted and forbidden according to Jewish law. And what the law of the land should be regarding abortion is a separate topic. It has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with what we're going to discuss today. So if anybody's going to bring it up, I'm telling you now, we have nothing really to say about it. You'll listen to what we have to say, and then you'll decide what you feel about the connections of Jewish scholarship on abortion and comparing it to what's happening in our country. So I just want to make that clear because it's probably one of the most heated debates that America has for many years, and I don't see it going away. But anyhow, I'm going to start off by showing a video, and that will be like the case study. I have the feeling that some of you have seen the show on Netflix called Shtisel. Raise your hand if you heard of Shtisel.
I've heard of it.
You've heard of it, but never saw it. Darlene, you never heard of Shtisel? You don't think so? Okay.
I thought it was, yeah, I saw it.
Did you see it, Dan?
I saw the whole thing, yeah.
You saw the whole, did you like it?
Yeah, I did like it.
You know that it's, first of all, for me, I don't watch a lot of these Netflix things. I don't have the time, and for some reason, as I'm getting older, I'm just not like excited about these things. But my sister kept bothering me for like 2 years. She said, "You got to watch this. You got to watch this." And I said, "Yeah, whatever. When I have time." Just one night, I started to watch it, and guess what? For 3 days, I couldn't put my phone down because I had to watch the what is it? 3 seasons? I don't know. Each season has what, 10 episodes or more, so I couldn't put it down. It was a depiction of Jewish family in the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood called Mea Sha'arim. I don't know if you ever heard of Mea Sha'arim. That's where, okay, that's, the hotbed of ultra-Orthodoxy. And they depict, a family, and it goes, through their struggles. And the beauty is that there's a few nice things about it. Number one, their portrayal, the way they dress, the way they speak. The actors were terrific. They weren't religious people. Yeah, they're Jews, they're Israelis, but they were able to pick up on the way they speak, on everything, the hats, the beards, the way they walked, the way they talked, everything about them. I was fooled into thinking that these people were actors from that neighborhood. I mean, I know that they would never do it, but that was the only reason I knew that they were, actors. They weren't really religious Jews. But anyhow, the acting was terrific, because if you ever see, people who portray, like Gene Wilder is portrayed as a rabbi in Frisco Kid. I don't know if you've seen Frisco Kid. It's a funny movie, but he's not a rabbi. You can see the hat is like, come on, he needs a real hat. It's a $20 hat. He needs to wear a $500 hat. You just can see he's not a rabbi, but it's not made to be.
Yeah.
Anyhow, that's number one. Number two, it really, you can identify with them, because the struggles that they are going through is pretty much the struggles that you're going through. That's pretty much what it's all about. Anyhow, so in one of the episodes, I don't remember what season, maybe Dan will know, but in one of the episodes, one of the characters, her name is Ruchami, her name. By the way, Ruchami comes from the word Rahmana, which means to have mercy and pity. So that's her name, Ruchami. And Ruchami, ends up getting married, and she becomes pregnant. And during the pregnancy, the drama is that the doctors tell her that the baby or the fetus has to be aborted. And the reason that the baby has to be aborted, nobody can afford the baby. Anyhow, abort the baby is because the fetus is endangering her life. She could die. It's a very high likelihood that she's going to die. So it's either the fetus or her. Someone has to give up their life. So when the doctors come to her and tell her her circumstance, her situation, she says, I'm not aborting the baby. And she's going to believe in Hashem. Anyhow, I'm just going to show you the video. Let me share it with you. It's a cute video. Well, the story is not true, but it can be true. And there are stories like that come up every once in a while. So let me share the video with you. Here we go. All right, give me a second here.
Shtisel is a highly popular, multiple award-winning Israeli television series about a fictional family living in a fervently religious Jerusalem neighborhood. Two of its characters, who go by the stage names of Ruchami and Hanina, are depicted as a young couple. Ruchami becomes pregnant, but at 21 weeks, she is hospitalized for acute shortness of breath. Ruchami is informed that she has been diagnosed with pulmonary arterial hypertension, a rare disease, dangerously exaggerated by her pregnancy. She is told that to save her own life, the doctors must remove her baby, which will almost certainly not survive.
ההיריון מסכן את החיים שלך, גם עכשיו הוא מסכן את החיים שלך, ובכל שעה נוספת הסכנה גדלה. המלצה של הרופאים במקרה שלך זה חד משמעי. צריך להפסיק את ההיריון כמה שיותר מהר ולהעמיד.
But Ruchami would rather take her chances. Does not want to lose his wife. Her life should take precedence, but Ruchami insists on choosing otherwise. Alina reaches for his cell phone. Thankfully, that scene was simply an act. But how do you think a rabbi might respond to a similar, real-life drama? Does Jewish law support a mother's choice to voluntarily risk her life for the sake of offering her fetus a chance of survival?
All righty. Anyhow, that is the question for tonight. Well, that's the case study for tonight, but we're going to see other perspectives, other points, and different scenarios. So the first question that we have is that Ruchami is saying, well, I'm not going to allow for the fetus to be aborted, and I'm going to take my chances. Does Ruchami have that right to ask that question? So before we address this case study, before we even get to talk about abortion, we need to begin the conversation about abortion to begin that conversation about abortion according to Jewish law, how Yiddishkeit, Judaism, sees abortion, we should really first analyze a Talmudic passage that really offers insight into the Jewish philosophical view of an unborn fetus's status, okay? So if we understand in Jewish law how Judaism sees a fetus philosophically, if we understand that, then we can begin our journey in trying to resolve and trying to understand how to resolve questions such as the video that we just saw. Okay. Now, if you look on page number in your book, page 96, there's actually the Talmud that we're going to read. On the right and left side, you'll see those narrow columns. That's the commentary in regards to that piece of Talmud. And that gives you much more insight than what we're going to cover for tonight. So we're not going to read all of that stuff because there's not enough time. So that should be done at a later point. So for right now, everybody, excuse me, please turn to page. Marla, I apologize about last night. I didn't text you. For some reason, I feel bad. You came. But anyhow, I just want to apologize.
You're ready.
Yeah. It was very important to go there, and I didn't contact you indirectly. But my apologies. All right. We're going to read the Talmudic passage, and we're going to then dissect piece by piece this piece of Talmud, and we're going to see philosophically how the rabbis of 2,000 years ago understood philosophically what exactly is a fetus. Isn't that the big argument? People are saying the value of a fetus is this. Is it a full life? Is it a half a life? Is it in a full life in the first trimester, second trimester? Nobody knows how to figure this thing. Is it my body, his body, God's body? We're trying to figure it all out. Nobody knows. So we're going to take a look at what the rabbis discussed regarding a fetus. And they say directly what it is. But there are cryptic messages within this passage. So we're going to try to reveal the cryptic messages that the Talmud is discussing here. So text number 1, page number 98. You guys ready? Here we go. A fetus inside its mother's womb resembles a folded writing tablet. Its 2 hands rest on its temples. Its 2 elbows rest on its knees. Its heels rest against its buttocks, and its head lies between its knees. Its mouth is closed and its navel is open. It eats what its mother eats, drinks what its mother drinks, and produces no excrement. A lamp burns above its head and sees from one end of the world to the other. By the way, in the first paragraph, what we basically read was the physical aspect of the fetus, which is interesting because there were no sonograms in those days. So it's amazing that they really got it right. They knew how the position of the baby and how the baby looked while it was in the mother's womb. Now we're speaking about a spiritual dimension of what is happening to the fetus in the womb. And this is more cryptic. So the first thing is that a lamp burns above its head. Anybody know what that is? You don't have to tell me now. We're going to figure that out in a few minutes. Okay, could be. We're getting there. You're up to something. The fetus is taught the entire Torah. Imagine it's got a private tutor. However, as the fetus emerges into the world, an angel approaches and strikes its mouth, causing it to forget the entire Torah. So none of us come out into this world knowledgeable in the Torah as we knew the Torah while we were in our mother's womb. The next thing is the fetus does not emerge before it's made to take an oath. Wow, the fetus has to make a commitment and take an oath. What's the oath? What is the content of the oath? Be righteous and not wicked. So the Torah tells us, the Talmud tells us 2 basic things. One is physically what is happening, what the fetus looks like, and then it's telling us what is happening to the fetus inside the body. We are going to focus on this.
Quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Technical question.
Yeah.
Are we talking about a Jewish fetus or every
Every
fetus?
fetus.
Okay.
Every fetus.
I was gonna ask, thank you.
It's for right now. It's not even that important, even
Okay.
though you could say it's a Jewish fetus because the
The
Talmud
Torah.
speaks to Jews.
Yeah.
But
and
it's
then
not that
talk
much
about the
different.
Torah.
Because you're asking about the Torah. I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that exactly.
Yeah.
But anyhow, that doesn't change the conversation because this applies also to non-Jewish people as
Okay.
well. Okay. So I want to focus on 3 curious points in the second part of this reading, which basically they're more cryptic. I mean, they're not that hard to figure out, because Darlene actually figured out the first point. So what are the three things we're going to focus on? Number one is a lamp burns above the fetus's head. That's the first thing. What does that mean exactly? What is there literally a lamp above the kid's head? And what kind of lamp? Is it kerosene? Is it oil? Maybe you had LED lights on it. Who knows? B, it is taught the entire Torah. So what does it mean that it's taught the entire Torah, and why they taught the entire Torah? And the third thing, it makes an oath. What is the exact meaning of the idea that the fetus has to take this oath that it's going to be a righteous person? All right, so let's find out what the meaning of these three things are. So let's start off with the first part, and that was that a lamp burns above its head. So I asked you a moment ago to think what it means, and Darlene got it right. It actually is the analogy of the neshama, of the soul, which means that God is now connecting the body to the soul. You ever hear the verse where it states, Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, the light of God, or the candle of God, is the soul of man, which means that the soul represents that light, the fire. That's what the lamp is all about. Okay, so the lamp is showing us, this is telling us something very, very powerful, that the fetus already has a unique human soul. That's what's going on over here. A human soul that's associated with it. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing that the Talmud told us is the fetus is taught the entire Torah. That's kind of interesting. What's the point of 9 months of gestation? Why does the baby or the fetus have to go through 9 months of gestation? That basically allows the fetus to develop and to mature so that it can live outside the womb. The fetus is not capable of living outside the womb, certainly after the first 2 trimesters, and even in the 3rd trimester, it's questionable at what point it can actually live outside of the womb. So gestation is not only a time for physical maturity and physical growth, but gestation is also a time when the body and the soul become prepared, right, for living a productive and spiritual life outside of the womb. So when we teach the Torah to the fetus, what are we actually doing? We're preparing the body and the soul, which are being connected at that point. So it comes out into this universe, and it has a sense that it has to do altruism, it has to do mitzvot, it has spirituality, it's trying to achieve holiness. So even though we forget the teachings of the Torah, it's sort of like not unfamiliar to us. Sometimes like you have this desire or this feeling to be more spiritual, I'm more close to God, whatever that feeling that really, or perhaps it really comes from the time that you were studying the Torah while you were in the mother's womb, okay? So it's sort of a subconscious memory, spiritual subconscious memory, which makes us feel warm to the Torah, and it makes us feel comfortable and natural when it comes to the teachings of the Torah. So that is the second idea. So we got the soul, and then we have the preparation of gestation physically, but also spiritually through teaching Torah. What's the third point that the passage told us? And this is kind of interesting, that the fetus takes an oath. And the oath is stating, we want you to be a righteous person, which means that our achievements should be, our goals and our aims, we should look to be as perfect as possible, like me. Jeff, just follow my direction and you'll be perfect. There's a possibility. Just don't worry. It'll happen. Just follow my ways. All right. So this final point, when we talk about God administering an oath to every fetus to be a tzaddik, right? Tzaddik means to be a righteous person. What is the Hebrew word for oath? Does anybody know? It's called a shavuah. But in this, when the Talmud, in the passage of the Talmud, where it describes that we administer an oath, we use the word mashbi'im, okay? Mashbi'im also can be read as masbi'im. If you know Hebrew, you can play around with the shin and make it into a sin. And the word masbi'im means to satiate, to be satiated, to be full. Meaning that during gestation, the fetus is granted all the tools necessary for it to live a righteous life. So when we give and administer the oath stating that you must be righteous, we gave you the tools. God is stating, I gave you the possibility to be responsible, to be as perfect as a tzaddik. So no one has the excuse to say, well, what do you want from me? I don't have the tools. I don't have the wherewithal to be a righteous person. What we are saying to the person is that God prepared us in the womb to already have the possibility of being the best person that we can be. Okay, so what is the underlying perspective that we can glean from this passage of the Talmud? What could we learn from this? So, number one, we shouldn't regard the fetus as just a lump of flesh. That's what this Talmud is really telling us. It is both a body and a soul. The Talmud is already philosophically seeing the fetus. It's connecting to its soul. What did we say? That the lamp is above the head of the fetus. If God invested so much in preparing for a fetus for life, it teaches it the Torah, it makes it take the what do you call it, the oath, which means that it should be satiated. Yeah, go ahead.
With all due respect to Jeff's point,
Yeah.
when you say it takes the Torah, if you're not a Jewish soul, you're not gonna be.
I'm going to be honest with you. That's
Yeah.
not an important point for right now. No, it's not an important point because it doesn't have anything to do with abortion. That is a different question about the difference between Jewish souls and non-Jewish souls. That I will talk. I'm happy to answer that question, but afterwards, because it's going to. It's not confusing because it's going to derail the class. The Talmud speaks to Jews. The Talmud speaks to Jews. So let's just apply this for Jewish people. What happens to non-Jews is a separate question that will, if we get into the topic and the conversation, it's too, not complex, but it's too elaborate and sensitive that it will derail the whole lesson. So there's no point in right. It will have no bearing on the conversation about abortion. That's, I'm not trying to deflect or push away the question. It's an important question, but don't get carried away with it because it has no bearing on the class. It's a separate topic. Okay, so what we're trying to say here is that God is preparing the human being, the human fetus, preparing it spiritually. Means God takes the fetus seriously and doesn't see it just as a lump of flesh that has no value whatsoever. It has tremendous amounts of value. And already we see that it's bonding and connecting with the soul. It is studying the Torah, even though it's forgetting it, but it's still studying the Torah. So it obviously means that the fetus's future is very important in the eyes of God. In the eyes of the Talmud, philosophically, it's very, very valuable, this fetus. So accordingly, based on what we just read, what do we say? What are we saying here? That aborting a fetus is no simple matter. Okay? Now, if I told you now that halachically, in Jewish law, it is never, ever permissible for anybody to do a procedure of abortion, the lesson would end right this second, and we can all go home. And I think Mark Shanowski is thinking to himself, you know what? Great. I can do better things than listen to the rabbi. Right, Mark? No, didn't you tell me that last time? So I have bad news for Mark. We're continuing the lesson. That we have a lot of things to say here. Because as we say in Judaism, on the other hand, okay, what did we just finish saying? That the great value there is to the fetus. But now we have to say, on the other hand, right? That's what Jewish people always say.
The economists said infinite number of hands. If you would talk to economists, always say, on the other hand.
On the other hand, right. On the other hand, that's what you have to do here. So I thought it was just a Jewish thing when you study the Talmud. On the other hand, well, now we have to talk about the other hand. All right. This same Talmudic passage indicates that a fetus is not quite equal and complete as a full-fledged human being. How do I know that? Because if you dissect this Talmud, if you look at every word it's saying, it says something very interesting. What did it say about the lamp? That the lamp burns within the fetus or above the fetus's head? It said above the fetus's head. What is the meaning that the lamp is burning above the head of the fetus, not in the fetus? That means every one of us, when we talk about our soul, where do we point to? Like our heart, inside of me, to the center of our body, because it's inside of us. Nobody says, oh, first of all, we don't use the word the lamp above us. The soul is not above us, it's in us, it's part of us, it's one with us. So the bottom line is, what the meaning here is when it states that the lamp is above the head, It means this expresses the idea that while the soul is present close to the fetus, or maybe even in the fetus, it is not yet fully integrated with the fetus's body. It's not fully integrated. Okay, that is philosophically what the rabbis mean when they say that it's above the head. So in a certain sense, they remain two distinct entities. You have the soul and you have the body, and they're going on a few dates. They're getting to know each other. They want to see if they're compatible with each other. Well, actually, they have no choice to decide that. They want to figure out how are they going to make it work? How is the soul and body going to become a one force, a one team, and make life work for them? So they remain two entities. A complete human being is one whose body and soul comprises a complete integrated unit. So the reason why we are full-fledged human beings, in principle, philosophically, Jewishly philosophically, is because your soul and your body have become integrated. Okay? So now we see that there's two sides to the story over here. On the one hand, the rabbis talk about the great value of the soul. It's getting ready to be connected and integrated with his soul. It's being taught the Torah. God is really going out of his way to nurture this fetus to be prepared to come into this world. So this is not just a mush of meat. This is a real valuable entity. But on the other hand, it doesn't have the same value. I don't know if value is the right word. It doesn't have the same status, maybe. I don't know value, but it doesn't have the same status as a human being that's outside of the womb. Another important idea is that what did the rabbis, and this is in the physical sense. I want to go back to the physical sense. What did we talk about the fetus? It has no independence. Where does it get its nutrition from? The mother. Where does it get any sustenance? Where does it get life force? Everything about it is dependent on who? The mother. It has no possibility to live independently. It cannot go out there and cook its own meals. It cannot prepare or buy its own meals. All right? So the fetus does not have anything on its own accord, almost nothing. And the mother provides everything for it. This is very, very significant. And it is because it's the one of the most essential aspects of being called a human is that you have independence. You can breathe for yourself. Okay? That independence is what defines you as a human being. So what's the bottom line? That the passage of the Talmud gives us basically two sides of the coin, as I mentioned. On the one side, it tells us the great value. It tells us, about the soul connection, about teaching of the Torah, about being sworn into before it's born. It's made to take an oath that it's going to be righteous. But at the same time, it also talks about the lack of human independence in terms of body and soul, and in terms materially, physically, it does not have the same connection or independence as a human being. So the bottom line is that the above Talmudic passage suggests a degree of philosophical tension, right? So we're pulling sort of like in two directions. On the one hand, it's almost human-like. On the other hand, it's missing a very integral part of what it means to be a human being. Can't breathe for itself. Okay, so that is the great tension that the philosophical tension that we just discussed. All right, so this idea, this tension, also is reflected in practical Jewish law, what we call halacha, or in halachic perspectives pertaining to abortion. So when we see abortion, we have the same tension. On the one hand, it's very valuable, so you cannot take its life. But on the other hand, what we're going to see is that there is a time, it's not the rule, it's the exception, that there are times that the fetus does not have the same standing and the same status as a full-fledged human being. So in the case of Ruchami, it was the mother versus the child. So halacha also has that kind of a tension as well. So that tension exists in our philosophically about the fetus, but it also exists in practice in the halacha. Let's see how this tension plays itself out. So in order to get to that, we really have to now go to the source of what the Torah, it's in and of itself, thinks about the fetus itself. How does it value the fetus? I keep saying the word value. I don't know if the word the status. How does it see the status of a fetus? So let's go to the book of Shemot, which is the book of Exodus. That's the second book of the Torah, chapter 21, verses 22 and 23. Let's read it. I'm going to read it on page number 100, text number 2. Here we go. You guys ready? If men are embroiled in an altercation and a blow lands on a pregnant woman and her fetuses, by the way, just somebody asked me this morning, what does it mean, fetuses? Why plural fetuses? So it's not twins. Fetus is actually an interesting point. It means that the harm is so powerful that when you kill off one fetus, in essence, that fetus could have ultimately had children and more children. So it's future fetuses. So just giving more power to the idea. That's the meaning. There's more ideas about it, but that was one that I thought would satisfy the question. All right. So again, two men are, or it doesn't say two. If men are fighting, and the blow lands on a pregnant woman and her fetuses, right? And her fetuses emerge, and there is no tragedy. The perpetrator must certainly be punished through providing restitution in accordance with the judge's orders. So, if you do some harm, I'm not sure what the harm is yet. We're going to have to analyze this verse. What is the punishment? Restitution, which means money, monetary punishment, no death penalty. If, however, there is a tragedy, you must provide a life for a life. So when does a person get the capital punishment? When you murder somebody. Okay, so let's now analyze this verse. It needs some clarification. And Baruch Hashem, I'm here to help you clarify the verse. What is the meaning of the phrase, her fetuses emerge and there is no tragedy? So there are two ways to see it. One is the fetuses and the mother survive. So all you have to do is give restitution, right? Pay the mother for the trouble because she gave birth a little earlier, right? Choice B, this is multiple choice. I always love multiple choices tests because if I didn't know anything, I just choose and hope for the best. It almost never worked. That's when I was a kid. I was a lazy kid sometimes when I wasn't a very studious kid. Anyhow, choice B is the mother survives, but the fetuses, the mother survives, but the fetuses die. Which one do you think? It's A, the fetuses and mother survive, or B, the mother survives, but the fetuses die. Which one do you guys think it is? You would say A, that when the passage says her fetuses emerge and there is no tragedy, it means that what? That the fetuses died.
They both survived.
Huh?
There is no tragedy.
That there was no tragedy. Okay. Okay. Very good. We'll find that. What do you think, Jeff? That the no tragedy means that
the no tragedy, yeah, I'd go with A.
You'd go with A. Okay, let's go to B. The perpetrator must certainly be punished. Okay, so the Torah says that the perpetrator must be punished through providing restitution. What is the basis of this restitution? A, provoking a premature healthy birth, or B, causing the death of the fetuses. Which one do you think here is? So he's giving restitution. Obviously, it has to be A because you said earlier A. So the second one would have to be A as well because you said that the baby didn't die. So again, if you answered question 1 with A, question 2 has to be answered with A as well. Darling, do you want to change your mind now?
No, I'm just.
You're sticking to your guns,
Yeah,
Jeff?
that makes you think about it, yeah.
You're sticking to your guns, or?
1B is looking like.
It's getting harder now, huh?
Yes, yeah, definitely. Thinking about it.
I told you guys this is not an easy class.
Yes.
All right. 3. What is the meaning of the phrase, if there is a tragedy, you must provide a life for a life? Choice A, the fetuses die, the assailant receives the death penalty, or B, if the mother dies, the assailant receives the death penalty. Again, this follows in the same pattern. If you said A for the first 2, you got to say A for the third one as well. If you said B for 1 and 2, you have to say B. All right, I'm going to make this quick. The answer is B for everything.
Wow.
Okay, so the interpretation of the Torah is that when we say that her fetuses emerge and there is no tragedy, it means that the mother survives, but the fetuses died. There is no tragedy because the Torah does not see the fetus in the same status as the mother. And therefore, what is the punishment if you kill fetus? What's the punishment? Pay money, restitution, monetary restitution. Okay, and 3, if there is a tragedy, which means tragedy means that a human being, a full-fledged human being got killed, right, murdered, then the mother died, and then it's a life for a life, okay? Yeah, go ahead.
Is there an age differential, because prior to there's babies can live outside at 6.5 months, or
It's a good question. You're asking me at what stage. So I'm going to answer you that it doesn't matter. It can be 3 minutes before she was ready to give birth. That's what we see. That's a great question. However, one second. Having said that, we're going to leave that for later, because the rabbis will distinguish between a few things, different times of the pregnancy. Darlene asked me a good question. When we say that the fetuses were killed, what time was it? Was it the first trimester, second, third? And I said, it doesn't really matter. As long as the fetus is in the womb and it has no dependence yet, the Torah says that the only compensation that has to be made is monetary.
What
Which
if the
means,
fetus,
yeah, go ahead.
what if the fetus emerges and is living for a while and then dies because of the trauma?
Marcus, tonight's Stump the Rabbi night.
I'm not doing the stuff.
That was last night. Tonight, that's why I changed the night. Tonight is not this. You missed that class.
We'll take it back.
No, that is a fantastic question. If the baby dies later, I'm not going to answer that question, because it is a very difficult question, and I don't have enough preparation. I didn't prepare for that one. That's a good one. But I know that it's addressed. That's something that is addressed. And by the way, that question can also be asked regarding if you hit somebody and they die 5 years later as a result of, of what you did. And in American laws, also, it's it's a.
I only asked that because if the baby emerges and then lives.
Yeah. No, I got it.
The soul is unconnected, right?
Yeah. So here the babies emerged, but they were dead. Okay, they died. They were killed. Yeah, Marla.
I'm confused with number 2. Which one is it?
I'm confused also. All right. So you want to know number 2. Number 2 asks, the perpetrator must certainly be punished through providing restitution. What is the basis of this restitution? So you have 2 choices to choose from. One, for provoking premature but healthy babies, because if answer A was the fetuses and the mother survived, then you're saying that the baby survived. So all you have to do is pay because the pain or the suffering that the mother had to go through for the trauma that she's going through. You're paying for that. Or because you actually caused the death of the fetuses. Does that make sense?
So why are they so, I want to use the word cagey with the wording? Why don't they use the word, the fetus is killed and say, right?
Great question. The Torah in general never gives us clear direction about almost any mitzvah. We do not know how to keep the Sabbath from the Torah. We do not know how to put on tefillin. We do not know how to keep Shabbat. We don't know how to do Passover. We don't know how to do Rosh Hashanah. We don't know anything. We don't know tort laws clearly, the laws of damages. Tell me a mitzvah and I'll show you clearly we don't know much about it. We barely know that we do a Brit Milah at 8 days. That's pretty much what we know. Having said that, which is a class in and of itself, the Torah was, and that it helps to prove, by the way, there's that this is the divine and there's an intent. The Torah wants us to be able to, through various different tools that the rabbis used, I think I've spoken about it in some course or lesson, that the rabbis use specific tools called the 13 principles of halacha, of law. We call them 13 klalim in Hebrew. And through those tools, they're able to figure these things out. Again, that's a whole different topic. Jeff, I'm gonna have to bill you for that. I'm gonna get rich tonight. Everybody's asking me these hard questions here. I did not know that I advertised for Stump the Rabbi night. All right, no, it's a great question, but I don't want to derail it's not going to derail it, but it's going to take a little time to talk about that, and it'll take away from what we really want to talk about here. So bottom line is, from this Talmudic ruling about, I'm sorry, I didn't do the Talmudic ruling. Okay, so now that we understand that the Torah in halacha, in Jewish law, what are we talking about here? We're saying that the fetus does not have the status as the mother, as a full-fledged human being. That would be like stating in the Talmud, you remember the Talmud said, well, it has a lamp above its head, and the meaning of that is to tell us that it's not a full-fledged human being. That's sort of equal to that. But let's say the other side of Jewish law that says something else. It says that the status of the fetus is equal to a full-fledged human being. So let me explain this idea to you in Jewish law. In Jewish law, Jewish people are supposed to keep Shabbat. I just mentioned that the Torah doesn't tell us how to do it, but the rabbis have a way of interpreting the Torah, and we now know how to observe Shabbat, what you're allowed to do in Shabbat, what works you are, and what works you're not. The definition of work in Shabbat has nothing to do with what we think is work. It's already defined based on 39 principle, not principle, but 39 avot melachot, which means the father laws, and then they go into the children, the grandchildren, and then they go on for really far. It's a pyramid. Okay, so you have to observe the Sabbath, and you cannot break any of those 39 types of work. The most famous one is creating fire in Shabbat. You're not allowed to create. In the old days, you took 2 stones, you couldn't do it. That applies. So today we extend it to electricity as well, but that's a different topic. Now, you're never allowed to desecrate the Shabbat for any reason, except for one time. And people ask me, Rabbi, what if somebody has to go to the hospital? Can you violate the Shabbat? Can you drive your car and take the person and save their life? Well, hey, of course. The Torah advocates for that. And the Torah would tell you that if a human life is in danger, one must do everything possible. It's not even a desecration. You would desecrate the Shabbat if you didn't save their life. You got to go all out of the way. So there is a law in the Talmud that discusses that on Shabbat, let me read the law, and you'll see for yourself what it tells us, the opposite of what we were just discussing in the Torah here, right? We were just talking about in the Torah that the status of a fetus, if you kill it, what happens? It's worth only money, right? You don't have to pay with your life. So that's a lower status. But when it comes to Shabbat, are you allowed to desecrate the Shabbat to save the life? Let's read it here. If on Shabbat a woman sitting on a birth stool dies before she was able to deliver her child, they should fetch a knife and cut open her womb to exact the child. The Talmud objects, but that statement is obvious. There is no prohibition against cutting flesh on Shabbat. You're allowed to do that. So Rabbi responded, the rabbi's name was Rabbi. The statement is necessary to permit the fetching of the knife by way of public thoroughfare, which is prohibited on Shabbat. That means you're not allowed to bring something from one domain to another domain on Shabbat, which has its own, it needs more explanation, but suffice it for now, you're not allowed to bring the knife. You are allowed to violate the Shabbat to save a fetus from a mother who passed away. So you only have, I don't know how much time you have left. By the way, this is being recorded 2,000 years ago. We're now and so before Caesarean, I don't know when the Caesarean was invented, but I don't think, or discovered, I don't think it's in the time of Caesarean. 2,000 years ago, did they do Caesarean? Or not that I know of. I don't know. Somebody can Google it. Anyhow, but the bottom line is that you're allowed to violate the Shabbat for the fetus. But one second, didn't the Torah tell us a moment ago that it doesn't have the same status as the mother? Jewish law in the Torah tells us that if you kill a fetus, what is its status? Pay money, restitution with monetary restitution. Now what do you tell me? Go violate the Shabbat for something that's not on the same status as a human being. So what do we see here? The tension in Jewish law. On the one hand, we see you have to only pay with restitution, money. On the other hand, we say, do everything just like it was a regular human being. So again, philosophically, we see the tension, and halachically, in Jewish law, we see the tension again. This is very, very important for us to understand that there are two sides to the coin, and it's important for us to know the two sides of the coin, because at the end of the day, I'm sort of like giving this away, abortion in Judaism is not what most people think, what most people think. So on the one hand, it's not liberal in that you can just do it, just because it's an inconvenience in your life. On the other hand, you can't just say if a mother's life is in danger that I can't kill it, I can't abort it either. It's somewhere in between, and we have to know what those exceptions are. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what are the exceptions in Jewish law where abortion would be permitted. So let me ask you guys a question. It's not that hard to answer this question. In principle, when would you say, according to Jewish law, it's not what you feel, what you think based on what you've learned up to now that you know this tension, when would it be permitted to perform an abortion in Jewish law? What would that exception be?
Save the mother's life.
Save the mother's life. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. It's to save the mother's life. So the Mishnah actually gives us a case where abortion is permitted only when the mother's life is in danger. The Mishnah actually tells us. Let's read the Mishnah. Let's see what the Mishnah says. It's in favor of abortion when the mother's life is in danger. So I'm going to read it on page number 103, text number 4. If a woman experiences life-threatening difficulties during labor, we cut the fetus in her womb and extract it limb by limb because her life takes precedence over the fetus's life. Okay? So what's the bottom line? What is the Mishnah saying over here? The Mishnah is saying something very powerful. 2,000 years ago, the rabbis decided, based on the teachings of the Torah, that the value of, or the status of a fetus is not equal, right, to the mother's life, okay? Which means that the mother's life takes precedence over the fetus's life. Darlene is looking at me. What are you talking about? I don't agree with that.
Establish this men, because why? If
When-
they had a baby, you think these men would be able
Darlene,
to take care of a baby?
Hold your
Of course
horses.
they're gonna.
Darlene, hold your
Why?
horses. The lesson hasn't begun yet. We haven't begun. I'm going to surprise you now.
Okay.
I'm going to surprise you now.
I'm
So now
okay.
Darlene is actually asking a very good question. Do they know what it means to carry a baby? Do they? Yeah, we're not going to go in that direction because that's more the emotional. We're going to go through a halachic process to figure this thing out. We got to figure these all things that you want to come out right. We need our heads. When we use our emotions in either direction, it usually spoils the food in the kitchen. That's what usually happens. So clearly, the Mishnah rules that the only time abortion is permitted is only when the mother's life is threatened. So now, Darlene, I want to, and I say Darlene because I'm not picking on you. I just want you to know, I want to share good news with you and everybody in the lesson that we're going to come to a more sophisticated understanding of how Jewish law regards the status of the fetus. So let's get more sophisticated on this because we're going to bring this more to our modern times. But before we bring it to our modern times, the Mishnah was written about 2,000 years ago. We're going to quote two great luminaries, two great rabbis who lived about 1,000 years ago, give or take. Rashi. Anybody know who Rashi is? When I say Rashi, is that familiar to you? Darlene, you know who Rashi? You ever heard of him?
Oh, sure.
He is the premier commentary on Torah. If you study Torah, the first commentary you study is the Rashi. Rashi, it says that his commentary is an explanation of Torah is your first layer of understanding Torah. He says it's made for a 5-year-old. Boy, it's a lot more sophisticated than that. I always wondered why he said it was made for the 5-year-old, starting from the age of 5 years old. But anyhow, that's a Rashi.
Genius.
5-year-old genius. There you go. It's made for the 5-year-old. And then we're going to talk about the great Rambam, Maimonides. Familiar with the Maimonides? I think everybody knows who we're talking about over here. So Rashi and Maimonides have a disagreement. What else is new, right?
Yeah.
What else is new amongst Jews? There's a very big disagreement, a fundamental disagreement between Rashi and Maimonides. And what do they disagree on? They disagree on the Mishnah that we just read. Not against the Mishnah, but the understanding of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah told us an interesting statement, that for as long as the fetus has not emerged into the world, it is not a life. Can I ask you guys a question? Why is, and it is therefore permitted to kill for the sake of saving the mother's life. The question becomes now, why? It needs to be explained, why is the mother's life on a greater, it has a greater status than the fetus? Why is that? I'm sorry, let me rephrase the question. Why are you allowed to kill the fetus to save the mother's life? Rashi wants to understand it, and Maimonides wants to understand it. And they come to two different understandings of the Mishnah, why you're allowed to kill the fetus to save the mother's life.
If the mother wasn't providing the nutrition in the womb, the baby wouldn't live. So again, it's not independent.
And what does that mean? If it's not independent, what does that mean?
Then you can kill it, abort it.
It means that we're gonna read now what Rashi says. Let's read what Rashi himself says about this. Text 5. Rashi's going to explain himself, and he's going to explain the Mishnah. A midwife reaches into the womb with her hand to dismember the fetus and to extract limb by limb. For as long as a fetus has not emerged into the world, it is not a life. It is therefore permitted to kill it for the sake of saving the mother's life. Rashi's explanation is, and Marla, what you just said is exactly the point, that because, and he doesn't say it clearly here, but for various different reasons, he says, as long as the fetus did not emerge into the world, it is not considered it's not a life. He doesn't say it's a half life. He says it's not a life, period. Doesn't have the same status. And Rashi knows about the Talmud that says that it studies Torah and it's got the soul, but it doesn't have the independence, or whatever reasons you want to assign. All I can tell you is that Rashi says something very powerful. The reason you're allowed to kill the fetus, abort the fetus, is because it's not a life. Now, why does Rashi have to explain himself? Because Rashi has a problem. Rashi says, if you think that the fetus is equal to the mother and you kill it, guess what? You have a big problem on your hands. There are 3 times that the Torah says that a person must give up their life. One is for idol worship. So if a person puts a gun to your head, say, go bow down to the idol, you must give up your life. That's our commitment to God. For adultery, if you're forced into adultery, and the definition of adultery is not for now, but you have to give up your life. And
If they're forced into,
adultery, yeah. A lot of people are forced into adultery. But anyhow, adultery in the Torah is different than what people think in America. And the third thing is, and this is what we want to talk about. If a person puts a gun to your head and says, go kill that other person, all right? The guy goes to person A and he says, kill B. And if you don't kill B, I'm going to kill you. What are you supposed to do? Allow yourself to be killed. You must get killed. It's the way that you're not allowed to kill anybody. It means you're not better than the other guy. You must die for that. So Rashi says to himself, 1 second. The rabbis in the Mishnah said that you're allowed to abort the fetus. You're allowed to kill the fetus to save the mother's life. Well, 1 second. If they're equal, well, then you're a murderer. You have to the mother should allow herself to die based on the principle that murdering, if you're asked to murder someone else, you must give up your life. The mother should have to give up her life. What business does the mother have to allow the doctors or whoever, the midwives, to kill the fetus? It's murder. They're not allowed to do it if you're equal. So Rashi explains it. Rashi says, guess what? It's not equal. Okay? It's not a life. If it was a life, then you're right. Then it's considered murder. But because it's not a life, there's no murder in this. Okay? Now, he doesn't take it lightly either to say, well, you can just do it any time. In this case, when it comes to the mother, the way we can justify the Mishnah stating that you're allowed to save the mother's life and not be considered a murderer is because we say it's not a life. It doesn't have that status. For this, only in this case. Rashi does not say, go do abortion anytime you want. That's not what Rashi is saying. I just want to make it clear. Maimonides has a different approach. Maimonides says, Rashi, I don't agree with you. By the way, Maimonides was born about 25 years after Rashi. So he knew what Rashi said. And he says, no. He says, no, it's a full-fledged life. Even with independence and all the excuses we have, it's full-fledged. If you kill the fetus, it's almost like murder, except in the point that if you killed it while it's in the womb, then there's a monetary restitution. That's your punishment. But otherwise, it has the same status as the mother, and a mother is not allowed to be saved because of, you're not allowed to kill the fetus to save the mother's life because it's equal. But Maimonides says you still could kill the mother's. The Mishnah was correct, but he has another logic. He has a different rationalization or explanation why the Mishnah is correct. He says what Rashi says, the reason Rashi says not correct, my reason that it's a full-fledged human life, but you're still allowed to abort it is for another reason. You're allowed to abort it for another reason. So now let me change the scenario. If somebody is chasing you, I don't know, they're angry at you, they're crazy, I don't know, it's a terrorist, they want to kill you. And you have a gun, and you're able to defend yourself and kill the guy before he kills you. Are you allowed to do that? Or should you give up your life if somebody wants to kill yourself? So this is to kill you. For defense, self-defense. Is self-defense permissible in the Torah? What do you think?
Yes.
Absolutely. What do we call a person who is chasing you, trying to kill you? What is the Hebrew term for that? It's a very famous term, rodef. Very good, Marla. It is called a rodef. The word rodef literally means to pursue. chasing you. It is a mitzvah to kill the other guy. The mitzvah. Maimonides says something unbelievable. He says the category of the fetus now is full-fledged human being. But instead of thinking of it as the guy of a choice of who you're, it's like saying to the mother, he's now a rodef, he's pursuing the mother, and the mother will die as a result. Now, obviously, it's not a conscientious rodef, but the Rambam applies the concept of rodef to the fetus and says now this fetus is chasing the mother, pursuing the mother, and the mother must, as a mitzvah for the mother to save her life. So they're equal in terms of full-fledged life, according to Maimonides, except for restitution if you kill it in the womb. But to save the mother's life, it's not because it's not a life. It's because it is a life, but it's a pursuer. Rodef. The concept of rodef is very important. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
I don't buy that one.
You don't have to buy it, but that's the bottom line. Okay, so just to understand that there's two ways to see it, because you have to realize that the Rambam is struggling, like we all are, and Darlene, I think, is struggling with that as well. In Rashi's term, what do you mean it's not a life? It's got a lot of aspects of a living human being. So just because the Torah says that you're punished if you kill it by monetary restitution, that doesn't mean it has less value. You're killing it; it's equal to the murder. So therefore, he has to come up with another rationalization, another logical reason why the Mishnah would say you're allowed to. And he says it's not because it's not a full life, it's only because it's a rodef. Let's read his words. Let's look at the Rambam, Maimonides, text number 6:105. We are commanded to not take pity on the life of a rodef, a murderous pursuer, if that is necessary to rescue the intended victim. On this basis, our sages rule that if a woman experiences life-threatening complications during labor, it is permitted to abort the fetus in her womb with drugs or with an instrument, for the fetus is considered a form of rodef against its mother. So there is a clear difference between Rashi and the Rambam. Now that we've brought it to a more sophisticated understanding of why you would be allowed, in the exception, by the way, it's only the exception, not Rashi, not the Rambam. Nobody believes you're allowed to abort a fetus in any other circumstance. It's only when the mother's life is in danger, right? So Rashi basically is saying that the fetus in the womb is not a life. Maimonides says he invokes the principle of rodef, and that's how we understand the idea of why the Mishnah says that when a mother's life is in danger, you're allowed to kill it.
What if the mother's a rodef? What if she's a murderer? She was chasing someone, she's killing, she's a bad guy.
Yeah, you're allowed to kill the mother.
What?
Any human being that's
Okay,
chasing you, it's a mitzvah to kill the person.
Well, if there's a baby inside though,
She's a bad
How
guy.
could she be the rodef?
no, I mean, she's pregnant, she has a baby, and then she's
Okay.
pursuing
Right,
somebody.
that's what,
Oh, she's pursuing. I think that she's pursuing the fetus.
No.
Oh, she's pursuing.
yeah.
So what's the question?
So what if she's the bad, yeah, so then.
So what-
Are you
what
allowed to
would you
kill her to, which kills a
Save the
fetus too?
I guess so. Yeah.
Railing, sorry.
Yeah, save your life. You know, you have them. I'm taking an educated guess. I think I don't see why you can't kill the mother. Even according to the Rambam, he would say, because then the child becomes your rodef too, by the way. He's so connected with the mother that he would be your. I'm just giving you something that I just made up right now, so I can't vouch for it. Okay, so you get this, how we went from this tension, and the Torah purposely creates a tension because on the one hand, it doesn't want you to think you can't do anything, because if it said to you, okay, abortion is always wrong, then guess what? Mothers would die. You know, even today it can happen. But what about, 100 years ago? I don't know what the numbers were. The statistics were high. Mothers were dying during childbirth. That was a real thing. It wasn't a joke. Okay. And there were times that you can save the mother. So what would we say? No, you could never do it. So it has to create that tension to create the sense that there's a high status for the fetus, but at the same time, it does not supersede the mother's life, even according to the Rambam. Okay, so now let's bring it to our times today, to our world, to our 2024 year. So how do we see the disagreement between the Rambam and Rashi in a practical case today? A practical case today would be if a pregnant woman is pregnant with a fetus, and the doctors diagnosed the fetus with a severe genetic disease. One example, and there's many genetic diseases, and by the way, Down syndrome might be one of them. Excuse me, Tay-Sachs, and this is I guess amongst Ashkenazi Jews, and by the way, you know, when people are Jewish, two Jews of Ashkenazi descent should actually take a test for it. If one is a carrier, then it's not possible to have a child with Tay-Sachs, but if both are carriers, that's a big problem. Sadly, I know a few families that have suffered from this tremendously. And this could be avoided if you only take a test before you decide to even, you know, in the Orthodox world, when they date, you know, a lot of the matches are made, what do you call it, arranged, what is not arranged, but whatever, they match them up. So before you go out, you always call in, because you have your tests done in high school. It's called Dor Yesharim. And there you give your number, then you don't have to say your name. You give your numbers, both of you give your numbers, and they tell you if you're compatible or not, if you should go on the date or not. Yeah. I know my son Mendel actually did not have, he was not introduced to his wife by what we call a shadchan. He actually met his wife, you know, they were talking to each other, something like that. And then they wanted to get married. We said, you guys have to do Dor Yesharim. They already had their test done in high school. So I remember that we submitted their numbers, and you have to wait overnight. They call you right away in the morning, but overnight, Mendel couldn't sleep a whole night. Because if God forbid, imagine it, because you have a problem, man, what do we do now? That would be a tremendous challenge and a big test. But anyway.
That's very interesting.
It is. It's very powerful. Anyhow, so Tay-Sachs is horrible, because I think after 6 months, you don't even know, well, you could know about it, but if you don't know about it, by 6 months, you start seeing the decline of the child. They lose their eyesight, their hearing, their breathing, everything is going down. By the time they're 5, 6, 7 years old, they can't survive past that stage. The emotional toll, the financial toll during those 5, 6 years is unimaginable. It's a horrible thing for any parent to suffer through this trauma. It's horrible. Anyhow, so the bottom line is, what if a married couple, they go to the doctor, everything's going hunky-dory, and they take their test, right? And they find out that the kid has Tay-Sachs. Diagnosed, or whatever genetic diseases they have. It's something that you can't live with. It's something that's very painful. So now, according to the Rambam, right, you would have to ask yourself a question. Let's see the Rambam, and let's see Rashi. The Rambam says that the fetus is considered what? A full-fledged human being in every regard except for restitution for your punishment. In every other regard, it is a full-fledged human being, right? Is the mother's life being threatened now?
No.
Nope, it's not being threatened. So what would Maimonides say, according to him, who says the only time or the only reason why you can abort a fetus is it's when it's a road diff? It's not a road diff. He's not bothering you. He's not trying to kill you. He's the one who's going to have, he or she's going to have the problems. What would the Rambam say? What do you guys think? He said, no. You're just going to have to pray to God and give you the strength to be able to overcome this challenge. Right? There would be no justification to terminate this pregnancy, even if this case, in this case, the fetus, you know, has, because in this case it has a life status. Okay. What about Rashi? How would Rashi see this case? Rashi would say, it's not a life. You know what? You probably are going to go through, the parents are going to go through hell and misery. There might be room. I'm not saying Rashi would agree with it, but at least with Rashi, you could work with the idea that you can abort the fetus. You can talk about being even compassionate to the fetus itself. Why does it have to go through the suffering? It's not a life yet. Maybe we could save it, according to Rashi's opinion. So in Rashi's opinion, there can be leniency. In Maimonides, there's absolutely no way to see leniency. So last week we quoted Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was a leading halachic authority in our times. He passed away in 1984, so that's considered our time. In 1986, he's considered a modern day authority on this, and he actually addressed this idea. Let's read what he said about this, and guess who he chooses to follow? Whose opinion he follows, Rashi or Maimonides? Well, this is just a guess. What do you think? He follows Maimonides. He takes the strict approach on this. Here's what he says. We're reading page 107, everybody. Here he goes. Abortion is forbidden as an act of murder. The only distinction between abortion and the murder of an already born human is that one is not liable to receive the death penalty for killing a fetus. The only instance in which abortion can be permitted is when it is necessary in order to save the life of the fetus's mother. That's it, no other time. This applies even to a fetus that the doctors predict will only be able to survive for a few years, such as children born with Tay-Sachs disease. Even if the diagnostic tests that have recently been developed determine that the child will be born with this disease, it is forbidden to abort. Although this will cause great pain to the parents, nevertheless, since the mother's life is not endangered by the fetus, abortion cannot be permitted. We must acknowledge that God directly in charge of all events, and we need to accept everything he does with love. Rabbi Feinstein's prohibitive opinion was the result of his viewing abortion as a form of murder, just like Maimonides. And the only time you can say that you can abort a fetus is when you consider the fetus a rodef, which means the mother's life would have to be in danger. That's his approach. And obviously Rashi would be the opposite. Okay? Now, there's some issues to consider. What are the issues to consider? This is going to be there's going to be a great need to avoid having a child that will live a short life with a terrible illness with tremendous amounts of suffering, right? So that's a horrible thing for parents to see, the suffering of their child. It's trauma beyond trauma. This is like almost one of the worst nightmares of a parent. The second thing is emotionally and psychologically, it's an unbelievable burden. Financially, it's an unbelievable burden. It's too great to bear. As a result of this, there's another rabbi that we quoted last week, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, who agrees actually with Rashi's opinion. And he says when it comes to Tay-Sachs, there might be room to say, it's not a life. It doesn't have the same status as a mother. He says we could be more lenient and use the opinion of Rashi, right? And state that abortion is not murder, and rule that one can abort a child with Tay-Sachs if the parents desires to do so. Here's what he says, text number 108. So this is already expounding on halacha in this realm in modern day. So here's what he says as opposed to Rabbi Feinstein. Page 108, text number 8. You inquired about the permissibility of an abortion in a case of Tay-Sachs disease, which can be diagnosed during pregnancy. The consequences of this disease are extremely severe and untreatable, and you asked whether this constitutes sufficient grounds to permit an abortion. After carefully considering all aspects of this issue, my conclusion is that this unique case, where the consequences of continuing the pregnancy and bringing the child to term are so severe, it is possible to permit an abortion before the fetus reaches the 7 months. So again, you remember you asked me earlier about time frame? He says before 7 months, you can do it. After 7 months, the third trimester, he believes that because of the potential viability of the child, that means if it lived outside of the womb, after the 7 month, he will say it's impossible. He will agree with Maimonides. I base this conclusion on the lengthy halachic analysis of the status of abortion that I published in my book called Tzitz Eliezer, which presents the conclusion that abortion does not constitute an act of murder. He takes Rashi's approach. After 7 months, abortion is far weightier decision because at that stage, the fetus typically attains a state of viability. So Rabbi Waldenberg, in his lengthy halachic analysis of the status of abortion, in which he concluded that it is forbidden under regular circumstances circumstances, abortion is not considered murder. It's not considered murder, even though you're never allowed to do it. Excuse me. But he sees a leniency when it comes to. No, I'm good. You don't have to. If you get any more, I'm fine. When it comes to a case of genetic disease where it's going to cause tremendous amounts of problems, before 7 months, he would agree that there's permissibility to allow the fetus to be aborted because he sees it, as Rashi sees it, that it's not a life. So you cannot use a rodef argument because it's not a rodef case. This is not what we call a rodef case. So most rabbinic authorities follow the stricter view of Maimonides, like Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Okay, so we've gone from initially, trying to figure out, what the Torah and halacha has to say about abortion. And finally, we came to that understanding. And again, this is in no way, these classes are not meant for us to become the halachic rulers of these issues, including myself. I'm not a rabbi of these kind of things. I always tell people you should go to my dear friend, Rabbi Jason Weiner from Cedar Sinai, who grew up here in PV. And, when he was 16 years old, we nurtured him and we taught him, and now he's a big rabbi. Anyhow, he deals with medical ethics. He wrote books on it. He knows all of this kind of stuff. He knows it on the back of his hand. I want to bring out another point in regards to abortion, because there's another time when even people who agree with Maimonides, and some say that Maimonides himself would agree to this, that there is a time that you can be you can be more relaxed with abortion. And when would that be? That would be that in the first 40 days of the fetus's life, right? It has no human status, even according to the Rambam. How do we know this? So we know this from an interesting case or an interesting halacha in the Talmud. So let's talk about a Kohen. Jeff, I always used to think you're a Kohen because your name is Katz.
Right.
But you're not.
You
should be a Kohen.
Yeah.
How much are you willing to pay? We have a Shavuot special.
Yes.
50% off.
Right.
But you better do it before midnight tonight. You better submit that money tonight. Anyhow, it's going to cost you.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work.
Yeah.
And we need you for a minyan next week on Wednesday and Thursday for Shavuot. I was going to text you. You get in town?
Let's see now. I'll be in town.
All right, I'll text you. You'll let me know then. But anyhow, the bottom line is that there is a law as follows. A bat Kohen. You know what the word bat Kohen means? Marla, tell everybody what a bat Kohen means. Are you a daughter of a Kohen?
No.
No. Okay, so your dad was not a Kohen. So you're not a daughter of a Kohen. I'm not a Kohen. I'm far from a Kohen. I don't even know. I don't even have any. Do I have relatives who are Kohanim? I don't even know. I don't think so. Anyhow, so if you're we know that the Kohen in the times of the temple were gifted. They had a privilege that they got gifts from the Jews, the farmers that would bring everybody was a farmer in those days, would bring gifts from their fields. This was called truma. This was the tithings that they would give. It's a whole mitzvah. Who was entitled to eat this food? The children, the wife, the children, everybody in the family gets to eat it, so they have all this privilege. Now, what happens to the daughter when she gets married and her husband is not a Kohen, right? What happens to her? She loses the privilege, her status of a Kohen, bat Kohen is no longer there. She loses that status. So I don't want to talk about the egalitarian issue. That's a separate conversation. You can throw stones at me afterwards. I'm just telling you what the halacha says, because I'm going to come to the point of this. Now, what happens if she decides to get divorced? Can she revert back to a bat Kohen? What do you guys think? Can she go back to the privilege? Can she get privilege? She's no longer married to the guy who's not a Kohen. She says, I like the privilege. I like eating all those apples. I get all those gifts. Now I'm not getting gifts. I'm divorcing the guy. No, I don't know what the basis of her divorce is.
I know.
Does she go back to her Kohen status?
No.
You don't know. You say no. Well, it depends. Like everybody, I think on the one hand, no. So it depends. If she did not have any children, yes, she gets to go back. If she does have children, she never ever gets to go back. That's not the issue I'm bringing up now. Here's the scenario. Here is the scenario. What if she went to the mikveh, she had relations with her husband, and then she said, you know what, I don't like the guy. I'm getting divorced.
And then she's pregnant.
1 second. We don't know. 1 second. Those days doing this. Darlene's getting ahead of herself. We don't know. How do you know if a person's pregnant a week later? Nobody knows that. It takes usually 30 days later and you figure out you're pregnant. And then she decides, I don't like the guy. Whatever. And I'm getting divorced. So the question becomes, can she go back to her father's house? Because maybe she's pregnant. If she's pregnant, she can't get the privilege. Or do we say something else? Is there a way out of this to get her back into her father's? Is she allowed to eat from her father's gifts right when she gets this divorce? She has no kids yet, and we don't know if she's pregnant. Is she allowed to go back and eat? But we can suspect maybe she's pregnant. That is a suspicion. That's what you brought up. Maybe she's pregnant. So how do we deal with this? Should we let her go back home or not? Because it's a possibility she's pregnant. We don't know.
Then that's where the abortion is allowed, isn't it? Yes.
Well, so it connects to abortion. So what we say is like this. If she's not pregnant, well, then there's no problem. But if she's pregnant, there's still no problem. Because the time that she's eating this gift is before the 40 days of the fetus. And what do we consider this is what, I'm going to read the sentence of the Talmud. So in reading 110, I'm not going to read the whole reading. In reading 110, it says something very powerful. And if she's pregnant until 40 days have elapsed, the embryo is mere fluid. The Talmud is giving it, and that's all I want you to know. I don't want to start arguing about the daughter of the Cohen and the privileges and all of that stuff. That's not what we're talking about. One thing that we need to know here, the Talmud considers a fetus under 40 days fluid. It's not a human being. You can apply that even to the Rambam. Therefore, if God forbid somebody finds out that within the 40-day period that there is a what do you call it? That there's a disease in the child, Tay-Sachs or whatever it might be, right? You can abort it according to everybody. There's no questions. Rabbi Feinstein would say fine. Rabbi Waldenberg would say fine. Everybody says no problem. I was going to say enjoy yourself. There's nothing to be enjoy yourself. Okay?
I mean, if it's mere fluid, would there be any restrictions?
Yes, there's restrictions. You can't just say it's inconvenient.
Okay.
That's not allowed. Only then it would, so the time that you would be allowed would be only when it's an extraneous circumstance like Tay-Sachs, not when the mother, less than the mother's, now the question has been lowered to the mother's life is not in danger, but we have a problem. But if a woman says, well, I'm sorry, I'm 19 years old and I wasn't planning on this. No, you're not, nobody agrees with that. Even the most lenient rabbi will say, based on what? For what reason? Okay? But under 40 days, because of this piece of Talmud, the rabbis see it as mere fluid, and therefore, in a genetic disease situation, everybody would agree that it would be permissible. Okay? That is the bottom line. Now, let's return to our case study. If we go back to our case, so we learned basically the generalities and the principles of how the rabbis come to rule on this. So we started off, with that Talmud, with the tension. Then we saw the tension on the Torah with and halacha. And then we see how we interpret the halacha itself, Rashi and Rambam. And then we see how Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Waldenberg see it. But now we're going to return to our case with Ruchami. What was the story of Ruchami? Ruchami is, her life is in danger, but it's now the reverse. We're not arguing about, well, we're arguing, the wife is saying, I don't want to abort the fetus. The question now becomes, does she have a right to say that? Does she have a right to say that? What right does she have to say that? So here is how Rabbi Sternbuch, who's actually a rabbi he's like in his 90s, he's living still, he's in his 90s, he lives in the place where Shtisel was made, that's where he lives, Meir Sha'arim. I think he lives there. And he's actually an Englishman. He was born in England originally. So he's originally from England. Does halacha mandate abortion, or may Ruchami choose to take her chances if she wishes? So he addresses this. Let's see what the conclusion is. Page 111, text 10. When the doctors are not clear about the degree of danger of the pregnancy poses to the mother, and the risk appears to be at the level of 50% or less, we rule that the abortion is allowed. Okay? However, if the mother insists that she does not want to proceed with an abortion and instead wishes to rely on God's mercy and kindness, we cannot stand in her way. She may choose such an approach. If there is room to argue that Maimonides would only permit abortion when a fetus is clearly a rodif that threatens the mother's life, although we do not follow that position, nevertheless, if a mother insists on acting in accordance with this position, we cannot prevent her. She may choose to rely on God's mercy and kindness. But by contrast, so this is only if the doctors are saying, look, we don't know, there's a good chance you'll live 50-50. So the mother's saying, you know what, I'll roll the dice. A good chance of survival. So then he will take the position and say, you know what, yeah, the mother can choose that. But he says he becomes stricter By contrast, when the doctors state that the danger is clear, right, and the mother's chances of survival are minimal, it is then forbidden for the mother to choose to be lenient about her own life and place herself in such a serious danger. In such a scenario, we unequivocally instruct her that she is halachically obligated to undergo an abortion and that she may not endanger herself. Now, in the Shtisel series, I don't know exactly what the doctors were saying, but it looked to me like the doctors were very serious about her passing if she continues with the pregnancy. So if that was the scenario, guess what? She would have no choice but to allow the doctors to do an abortion. So that gives us a halachic perspective. But I just want to end the lesson today because I started off the lesson by saying that we're not going to be speaking about American law and the whole controversy. It's a heated debate, and people get very angry at each other, and there are families that are split as a result, the brothers and sisters. People get very upset, and I don't engage in this conversation because I cannot engage in conversation because I come from a different point of view, and that's what I want to say. I just want to say that Jewish law does not believe in the primacy of personal autonomy. You remember in the first lesson we speak about euthanasia? What did we say about it? What was the principle about the question of suicide, of euthanasia? That our bodies do not belong to us. They're on loan to us. So we're the borrowers of it. We are caretakers for it. We're the trustees for it, whatever it might be, and we have to take care of our bodies. We have no right to harm our bodies. So therefore, when it comes to abortion, we do not have a right to start the conversation. It's my body. It belongs to me, and I can do whatever I want. We can't start that conversation from that point of view, right? We start the conversation from a different point of view, that our bodies do not belong to us. They belong to Hashem. So my body doesn't belong. How much more so the fetus's body doesn't belong to me. I don't have dominance and complete control. Well, you have control, but I don't have ownership of my body or the fetus. We're starting from that point of view. We are obligated to preserve our personal bodies and the bodies of the fetus. And therefore, when halacha says the mother's life comes before the fetus, it's not come from a point of view, well, it's because it's my body and I get to do it. The rabbis never thought of that. That does not come into play. It can't come into play. I'm not here to make the argument in the secular world. I'm just coming to explain to you that we can't begin the conversation from that point of view. It has no place in Jewish life. So the conversation of whether abortion is permitted or not does not begin from our bodies belonging to us, and I get to choose. Rather, we look at it from the perspective that our bodies don't belong to us, and halacha, which is what we believe comes from the Torah, which is God's word, the divine word, right? And the way Hashem wants it to be, they set the parameters. The halacha will have to set the parameters. And you know what? I think it's very fair parameters. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about abortion, we talk about euthanasia, if it's up to the decisions of the human being based on just their feelings and what they just think, right? Whatever your persuasion is, whatever your circumstances is, it's a very big slippery slope. Huge. I mean, we can go, as we see, just people randomly walk into abortion clinics and just do it randomly. That's a horrible thing, by the way. It's a terrible thing. But in America, we've been conditioned to say, yeah, it's not a big deal. And I know there are people who are sort of on the middle ground of this. And the Torah has a beautiful perspective on this because it respects life, but at the same time, it also respects the idea that some lives have a higher status than the other life. But that doesn't mean the other life you can't count for. It has zero value. Even Rashi believes there's something special about the fetus. And that's why the only time that abortion can take place is only when the mother's life is in danger. There's no other time that we have a discussion
except for the first 40 days.
Right. And well, in the first 40 days, it's also about you can extend the idea of the trauma of the parents.
Right.
That it's not going to kill them physically, but it's going to cause so much damage that it's almost equal to that. That's the reason for that. So you got to have a huge reason before 40 days. I'm going to give you another example. I don't know if you know what multiple reduction is. Today we have in vitro IVF and in vitro fertilization. That's how people become pregnant today. You get medical assistance. What happens if a woman becomes pregnant? I don't know, with sextuplets, but they find out before 40 days, which they do. Then the rabbis have an easier time to give you a positive decision to abort, to rule that you could abort it. After that, it gets complex, very, very complex.
How about frozen embryos? So what's the
Frozen embryos are allowed, and it's a big question. What do you do if you don't want them, to disregard them? It's not as complicated, but you're not allowed to give it to. You shouldn't. Now we're getting to a whole different topic about.
What incest, father impregnates daughter.
By the way, this question of abortion is being discussed in Israel now. It's very sad. After October 7th, we know that the women were raped. It's a clear thing. We don't know what's going on in Gaza, but I can assure you bad stuff is going on to the women there.
Right.
God willing, they will be saved, but it's going to be horrible if the women come back and they're pregnant. And they're discussing now about abortion. Now, if 9 months go by, they're going to have those babies. But the question will be, then there's nothing you can do. No legal system will allow for the murder of, that's murder. But I'm talking about if they're going to come back pregnant, the rabbis are already now preparing for a big discussion about that. It's a huge discussion going on right now about incest and that kind of rape. It's a big question going on right now. And you can read about it. It's online. It's not.
You would have thought that
Huh?
at least the questions of rape and incest would have been discussed going way back.
It is discussed. Yeah. Trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
In 1.5 hours, what could we already present to you?
Yes, that's
A
right.
very minimal amount.
Yeah.
If you go online, you're going to see 1 million more rabbis. I just
Yeah.
presented you 3 rabbis.
Yeah.
You know how many rabbis there are to talk about this? Rabbi Pendler, and that's Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's son-in-law who passed away. I mean, tons of people that have discussions and very valid things. And there's a lot of nuances. So this is just a general overview. It just gives us a glimpse. And I love the stuff because it really gives us a deeper perspective about Jewish law.
How it works.
And how it works. And that's the whole beauty of the JLI classes, is to give us that opportunity. All right, what I'd like to do now is if anybody would like to share something, if anybody would like to ask a question, comments, anything goes now. Anybody? Okay, so it looks like everybody knows everything.
I feel like I know less than I started. All the things to question, ways to look at it.
Yeah. So what we're going to do now is, so first of all, I'm going to end the Zoom, but we'll continue to stay on the recording. We're going to end it right now.